March 3, 1944, 22,000 feet above Rabaul. Second Lieutenant Robert M. Hanson watches 3 B-24 Liberators fall behind the formation. Smoke trails from their damaged engines. Their gunners are silent, ammunition exhausted. Below them, 15 Japanese Zeros circle like wolves isolating wounded prey. His radio crackles. Red 3, Red Leader, maintain formation, do not break off, that's an order. Hanson's hand tightens on the stick of his F4U Corsair. The bombers are 400 yards behind and dropping. The Zeros are closing for the kill. 30 American airmen are about to die unless someone intervenes. His flight leader's order is clear. Standard doctrine. Never break formation to chase individual targets. Never risk a fighter for bombers already doomed. The mission is the formation, not individual aircraft. But Hanson isn't watching doctrine. He's watching 30 men about to be slaughtered. He rolls inverted and dives. What happened in the next 12 minutes would become one of the most controversial and heroic actions of the Pacific War. A single fighter pilot, disobeying direct orders, diving alone into 15 enemy aircraft to protect 3 crippled bombers he had never met. The statistics seemed impossible. 1 Corsair versus 15 Zeros. 3 damaged bombers barely staying airborne, 400 miles from friendly territory, and a young pilot who had been explicitly ordered not to do exactly what he was about to do. This is the story of how defiance became heroism, how one pilot's decision to ignore orders saved 90 lives and changed fighter escort doctrine forever. It's about the split-second choice between following commands and following conscience. By March 1944, the Pacific War had reached a critical phase. American bombers were striking deeper into Japanese-held territory, targeting strategic installations across the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and the Bismarck Archipelago. But these long-range bombing missions came with a lethal problem. The further the bombers flew, the more vulnerable they became. Japanese air defenses had adapted. Rather than challenging the heavily armed bomber formations head-on, Zero squadrons developed tactics of patience and persistence. They would shadow the formations, waiting for stragglers, waiting for the damaged, waiting for the vulnerable. And when a bomber fell behind, separated from the protective crossfire of the formation, the Zeros would strike with overwhelming numbers. American bomber crews had a saying, "Stay with the formation or die alone." But staying with the formation wasn't always possible. Mechanical failures, battle damage, wounded crew members, dozens of factors could cause a bomber to lose speed and altitude. And once you fell behind, the escort fighters rarely broke formation to help. It was doctrine. It was logical. Protecting the formation meant sacrificing the individual. By early 1944, the loss rate for stragglers was approaching 80%. If you fell behind, you were already dead. The Air Force needed a solution. Fighter escorts needed to be more aggressive, more willing to break formation and defend vulnerable bombers. But doctrine is difficult to change, especially when it's written in the blood of previous mistakes. What the Air Force needed was an example, a mission that proved aggressive escort tactics could work, a pilot willing to demonstrate that sometimes the rules needed to be broken. They got Robert M. Hanson. To understand why one pilot would dive through 15 enemy fighters against direct orders, we need to understand the strategic nightmare that made such desperate actions necessary. 1943, the Pacific Theater had become a war of distance. American strategists faced a brutal mathematical reality. Every target worth bombing was beyond the range of safe fighter escort. The B-24 Liberator and B-17 Flying Fortress could strike targets 1,000 miles from their bases, but fighter aircraft of 1943 could barely manage 400 miles before needing to turn back. This created a killing zone, a 600-mile stretch where bombers flew alone, unprotected, vulnerable to every Japanese fighter in the region. The losses were catastrophic. In July 1943, a raid on the oil refineries at Balikpapan lost 9 of 13 bombers, a 69% casualty rate. The survivors returned with dead and wounded crewmen, shattered aircraft held together by emergency repairs and pilot skill. One B-24 landed with 347 bullet holes. The crews called these missions suicide runs. They weren't wrong. A B-24 Liberator carried 10 men. A typical bombing group fielded 40 aircraft. That meant 400 men flying into combat zones where Japanese fighters could attack with impunity. The mathematics of survival were simple and horrifying. If you flew enough missions without fighter escort, you would eventually die. Bomber crews developed their own defense tactics. They flew in tight formations called combat boxes, positioning aircraft so their .50 caliber machine guns created overlapping fields of fire. A properly formed combat box could put 100+ guns on any attacking fighter, creating a lethal sphere of defensive fire. But this only worked if the formation held together. When an aircraft suffered battle damage, an engine knocked out, hydraulics failing, control surfaces shot away, it lost speed. A healthy B-24 cruised at 215 miles per hour. A damaged one might struggle to maintain 180. That 35-mile-per-hour difference meant falling behind, losing the protection of the formation's guns. Once separated, a bomber became easy prey. Japanese pilots knew this. They would ignore the healthy aircraft and focus on stragglers, attacking from angles where the crippled bomber's remaining guns couldn't reach. A lone B-24 facing 3 or 4 Zeros rarely survived more than 5 minutes. The Air Force tried various solutions. They experimented with additional armor plating, but the extra weight reduced range and bomb load. They tested flying at different altitudes, but Japanese fighters could operate at any height. They even attempted night bombing, but accuracy dropped to nearly zero. The only real solution was fighter escort. But in 1943, no American fighter had the range to protect bombers deep into Japanese territory. The P-38 Lightning came close. It could escort bombers 450 miles from base. The P-47 Thunderbolt managed 425 miles with drop tanks, but the majority of strategic targets lay beyond even these extended ranges. So bomber crews continued flying into the gap, into that deadly 600-mile zone where they knew they would face enemy fighters alone. The psychological toll was immense. Crews watched friends' aircraft explode, watched parachutes blossom and then get strafed by circling Zeros, watched wounded bombers spiral into the ocean. And they knew that next time, it would be their turn. By January 1944, bomber crew morale in the Pacific Theater was approaching crisis levels. Replacement crews arriving from the States had heard the stories. They knew the statistics. Many wrote farewell letters before their first mission, understanding the odds. Command needed a game changer. They needed a fighter that could go the distance. More importantly, they needed fighter pilots willing to be aggressive, to break formation, to chase threats, to protect bombers even at personal risk. The aircraft would arrive first. The Vought F4U Corsair, with its massive range and devastating firepower, entered service in early 1944. With drop tanks, it could escort bombers 750 miles from base, finally matching the bomber's reach. But the aircraft was only hardware. The real question was doctrinal. Would fighter pilots be allowed to break formation and defend stragglers? Or would doctrine continue to prioritize formation integrity over individual aircraft? The answer would come from an unexpected place, not from headquarters or tactical manuals, but from a 23-year-old pilot who believed that orders sometimes needed to be disobeyed when lives were at stake. But here's where it gets interesting. The pilot who would change escort doctrine forever wasn't a seasoned ace with dozens of kills. He was a relatively unknown flyer who had been specifically ordered not to do exactly what he was about to do. Enter the Vought F4U Corsair. When it first appeared over the Pacific in early 1944, Japanese pilots thought they were seeing a new kind of aircraft entirely. The distinctive inverted gull wing, the massive four-bladed propeller, the unmistakable growl of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine. The Corsair didn't just look different, it was different. Vought Aircraft had designed it with a single purpose: dominate the sky. The F4U carried the most powerful engine fitted to a single-seat fighter, 2,000 horsepower driving a 13-foot, 4-inch propeller. That power translated to speed. The Corsair could reach 417 miles per hour in level flight, making it one of the fastest fighters in the world. It could climb at 2,890 feet per minute and operate at altitudes up to 36,000 feet. But speed wasn't its only advantage. The Corsair's armament was devastating: 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 3 mounted in each wing. When all 6 fired simultaneously, they delivered 1,200 rounds per minute. Pilots described the recoil as like hitting a brick wall. The entire aircraft shuddered when the guns opened up. With external drop tanks, the Corsair could fly combat missions 750 miles from base and still have fuel for 30 minutes of combat maneuvering. For the first time, American fighters could escort bombers to their targets and back without abandoning them halfway. The Marine Corps and Navy embraced the Corsair immediately. By January 1944, squadrons throughout the Pacific were transitioning to the new fighter. One of those squadrons was VMF 215, the Fighting Corsairs, based at Torquay Airfield on Bougainville Island. And one of their pilots was 2nd Lieutenant Robert Murray Hanson. Hanson wasn't the typical fighter-pilot profile. Born in Lucknow, India to Methodist missionary parents, he'd grown up between two worlds, American by citizenship, international by experience. He'd attended Hamline University in Minnesota, studying pre-law, seemingly destined for a quiet professional career. Then came Pearl Harbor. Hanson enlisted in the Marine Corps in May 1942. He was 22 years old, tall and lean, with a quiet intensity that instructors noticed during flight training. He wasn't the loudest pilot in his class or the most naturally gifted, but he had something more valuable, a methodical precision combined with aggressive instincts. His training records noted, above average pilot, excellent gunnery scores, tends to take calculated risks. That last observation would prove prophetic. Hanson arrived in the South Pacific in November 1943, assigned to VMF 215. The squadron was flying F4U Corsairs on bomber escort and ground attack missions across the Solomon Islands. It was brutal attritional warfare, daily missions against heavily defended targets, constant combat with experienced Japanese pilots. Most replacement pilots didn't survive their first month. Hanson not only survived, he excelled. His first kill came on January 14, 1944, when he shot down a Zero during a dogfight over Rabaul. His second came 3 days later. By February, he had 6 confirmed victories and a reputation for aggressive tactics. But something else set Hanson apart from other pilots. He had an almost obsessive focus on bomber protection. During escort missions, while other fighters would pursue Japanese aircraft that broke away, Hanson stayed close to the bombers. He understood that kills meant nothing if the bombers were destroyed. His squadron commander, Major Robert Owens, noticed this tendency. Hanson treats every escort mission like it's personal, Owens wrote in his logbook. He positions himself between the bombers and any threat, even when standard doctrine says to maintain formation spacing. This protective instinct would define Hanson's combat philosophy. He believed fighter pilots existed to protect bombers, not to accumulate personal kill counts. It was an unfashionable view. Most aces measured success in victories, not in bombers brought home safely. By early March 1944, Hanson had flown 32 combat missions. He'd scored 10 confirmed kills and damaged several more. But the mission that would define his career hadn't happened yet. On March 2nd, VMF 215 received orders for a maximum effort mission. Every available Corsair would escort a formation of B-24 Liberators striking Japanese installations at Rabaul, the fortress harbor that had become the keystone of Japanese air power in the South Pacific. Intelligence estimated 60-plus Japanese fighters would attempt to intercept. The briefing was tense. Pilots knew that Rabaul missions had the highest casualty rates in the theater. The Japanese defenders were experienced, aggressive, and willing to sacrifice themselves to destroy American bombers. Flight assignments were posted. Hanson would fly as wingman in Red Flight 4th position. His call sign, Red 3. His flight leader would be Captain Joseph Foss, a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient with 26 confirmed kills. Foss's orders to his flight were explicit. Maintain formation discipline. Do not break away to pursue individual targets. If bombers get separated, we stay with the main formation. This is a numbers game. We protect the most aircraft possible. Hanson acknowledged the orders, but as he walked to his Corsair, Bureau number 17,915, he was already thinking about what would happen if the doctrine failed. What would happen if bombers fell behind and faced annihilation? Would he follow orders and watch them die? Or would he do what instinct demanded, break formation and fight? The question was theoretical until it wasn't. However, what happened during the mission briefing would shock everyone involved, because the intelligence estimates were wrong. The Japanese weren't defending Rabaul with 60 fighters. They were defending it with over 100, and they had a new tactic that would turn the escort mission into a desperate running battle. March 3, 1944, 5:30 hours, Torquemada Airfield, Bougainville. The ready room was packed. 42 fighter pilots filled the benches, their flight suits already dark with sweat in the pre-dawn humidity. At the front, Major Owens stood beside a large tactical map showing the Solomon Islands, New Britain, and the target, Rabaul. Gentlemen, this is a maximum effort strike. 24B-24 liberators from the 307th and 394th bomb groups will hit Simpson Harbor and the Vunicano Airfield complex. Primary targets are fuel storage facilities, aircraft revetments, and the harbor installations. Secondary targets are opportunity, anything that looks important. Owens tapped the map with his pointer. Flight route, north from here passing west of New Ireland, approach Rabaul from the northeast at 22,000 feet. Time over target, 9:45 hours. Expected opposition, heavy and continuous. The intelligence officer, Lieutenant Morrison, stepped forward. Latest reconnaissance shows approximately 60 operational fighters at Rabaul, mostly Zeros with some Tony interceptors. They've been flying aggressive patrols since our last raid. Expect them to engage well before the target area. Morrison paused, flipping through his notes. Weather is favorable, scattered clouds at 8,000 feet clear above, visibility unlimited, wind northeast at 15 knots, sea state moderate. He looked up at the assembled pilots. One more thing. Radio intercepts suggest the Japanese are coordinating their fighter response differently. Instead of mass frontal attacks, they're using smaller groups to pick off stragglers. Stay with your formations. Don't get separated. Major Owens resumed the briefing. Fighter assignments. We're putting up 32 Corsairs in 8 four-plane divisions. That gives us better than 1-to-1 escort ratio. Each division has a specific zone responsibility around the bomber formation. He pointed to different sections of the formation diagram on the map. Blue flight, high cover 2,000 feet above the bombers. Green flight, forward screening 1 mile ahead. Red flight. He looked directly at Foss and his pilots, including Hanson. Your close escort, starboard side, 500 yards separation. Foss nodded. His flight would be closest to the bombers, the last line of defense if Japanese fighters broke through the outer screen. Rules of engagement, Owens continued, his voice hardening. You stay with your assigned positions. You do not break formation to pursue individual targets. You do not abandon your zone for personal kills. The mission is bringing those bombers home, not running up your victory counts. He made eye contact with several of the younger pilots. I know some of you want to be aces. I know you want glory, but this is a team mission. Formation discipline keeps everyone alive. Understood. A chorus of yes, sir, filled the room. Ammunition load, full belts, armor-piercing, and incendiary mixed. Drop tanks, standard 150-gallon externals jettisoned before combat. Radio discipline, tactical calls only, use proper brevity codes. If you're hit and can't make it back, ditch near the destroyer pickets northeast of Bougainville. We'll have rescue aircraft standing by. The briefing continued with technical details, frequencies, recognition signals, abort procedures. But Hanson's attention kept returning to one phrase: don't abandon your zone for personal kills. It made tactical sense. If every fighter broke formation chasing targets, the bombers would be left unprotected. Discipline won wars. But Hanson had seen what happened when damaged bombers fell behind. He'd watched Zeros swarm isolated aircraft like piranhas on wounded fish. He'd listened to the final radio transmissions, panicked voices calling for help that never came because the escorts were too far away, maintaining their assigned positions. Captain Foss approached him after the briefing. Bob, you're flying my wing today. That means you stay glued to my 6 o'clock unless I tell you otherwise. Clear. Clear, sir. I mean it, I know your reputation. You've got good instincts, but this isn't a free-for-all. We follow doctrine. Hanson nodded. Foss was a legend. 26 kills, Medal of Honor, one of the Pacific's top aces. If anyone knew fighter tactics, it was him. One more thing, Foss added, his voice quieter. If things go bad up there, trust the formation. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes get killed. Understood, sir. But as Hanson walked to his Corsair in the pre-dawn darkness, Foss's words echoed differently than intended. Don't try to be a hero. What if being a hero was the only way to save lives? The ground crew had F4U Bureau number 17,915 ready. Hanson did his pre-flight inspection by flashlight. Control surfaces, ammunition belts, drop tanks secure, engine cowling panels locked. Everything checked good. He climbed into the cockpit, settling into the familiar cramped space. The Corsair's cockpit sat high, giving excellent visibility forward and to the sides. But the long nose blocked downward vision, landing a Corsair required technique and trust. Around him, 31 other Corsairs were starting engines. The sound was magnificent, 32 R2800 engines building to a synchronized roar that shook the ground. 6:45 hours, takeoff time. The Corsairs launched in pairs, climbing into the brightening sky. Hanson tucked into formation beside Captain Foss, maintaining precise spacing. The bomber formation was already airborne, 24 B-24 Liberators climbing ponderously toward their cruising altitude. The flight north took 90 minutes. Hanson settled into the routine of long-range escort. Scan the sky, check instruments, maintain position, scan again. The ocean scrolled past below, endless blue broken by occasional white caps. At 8:40 hours, red flight crossed into the zone where Japanese fighters typically began their intercepts. The radio chatter increased, pilots reporting contacts, distant aircraft, possible threats. Stay with me because this next part is crucial. Because at exactly 9:13 hours, 32 minutes before reaching the target, the Japanese fighters appeared. And they didn't attack the way American intelligence had predicted. 9:13 hours, 140 miles northeast of Rabaul. The first Zeros appeared as glints of sunlight on metal, high and to the west. 8 contacts, then 12, then too many to count. Bandits 10 o'clock high, Angels 25. The call came from Blue Flight, the high-cover element. Hanson's eyes snapped left. Japanese fighters were diving from 25,000 feet, splitting into multiple groups. But they weren't attacking the bomber formation directly. Instead, they were positioning themselves in a wide arc, herding the formation like predators cutting a herd. Captain Foss's voice crackled over the radio. Red Flight, maintain position, stay with the bombers. The Japanese executed their attack with precision. 6 Zeros made a high-speed pass at the lead bomber element, forcing them to break formation slightly. Another group hit the trailing bombers from below. They weren't trying for kills, they were testing defenses, probing for weakness. And they found it. 3 B-24s in the rear of the formation, call signs Lucky Lady, Pacific Queen, and Iron Duke, had been struggling with engine problems since takeoff. Now, under the stress of evasive maneuvering, their situation deteriorated. Lucky Lady's number 3 engine began streaming black smoke. Pacific Queen lost oil pressure in her number 2. Iron Duke's entire left wing was trailing fuel vapor from a ruptured tank. All 3 bombers began losing altitude and airspeed. Within 2 minutes, they'd fallen 500 feet below the formation. Within 5 minutes, they were a quarter-mile behind. The mathematical reality was brutal. They couldn't maintain formation speed. They were separating, becoming vulnerable. And the Japanese noticed immediately. 15 Zeros broke away from the main engagement, reforming into 3 5-plane elements. Their target was obvious, the 3 crippled bombers now isolated from the formation's defensive fire. Hanson watched it happen, watched the Zeros position themselves above and behind the stragglers, watched the bombers' gunners traverse their turrets, knowing they were about to face overwhelming attack. Red Leader, Red 3, 3 bombers falling behind, 15 bandits closing on them. Foss's response was immediate and expected. Negative, Red 3, maintain formation, we stay with the primary group. But sir, those bombers. That's an order, Red 3, hold position. Hanson looked left at the main bomber formation, 22 aircraft still in tight formation, protected by 28 Corsairs. Then he looked right at the 3 crippled B-24s, 30 men in aircraft barely staying airborne, about to be attacked by 15 Japanese fighters with no protection. The doctrine was clear, protect the many, not the few. Maintain formation integrity, don't break away for stragglers. But doctrine didn't account for watching men die when you had the power to intervene. The lead Zero element began their attack run, diving toward Lucky Lady from 23,000 feet. The bomber's top turret opened fire, tracer rounds reaching up uselessly. The range was too great. The Zeros would close within gun range in 20 seconds. Hanson's hand tightened on the stick. What happened next shocked everyone on the radio net, because Second Lieutenant Robert Hanson said 3 words that ended his military career as he knew it, rolled his Corsair inverted, and dove alone toward 15 enemy fighters. Red 3 is engaging. 3 words transmitted over the tactical frequency. 3 words that violated direct orders. 3 words that committed Hanson to a fight he couldn't win by conventional mathematics. Captain Foss's voice exploded over the radio. Red 3, negative, return to formation. That is a direct order. Hanson didn't respond. His Corsair was already inverted, nose dropping toward the ocean 22,000 feet below. The altimeter unwound rapidly, 21,000 feet, 20,000, 19,000. Airspeed climbed past 350 miles per hour. In his rearview mirror, he could see red flight continuing on course, maintaining formation discipline. He was alone now. No wingman, no support. Just one Corsair diving toward 15 Zeros and 3 crippled bombers carrying 30 American airmen. The tactical situation was impossible. 15 Japanese fighters meant 15 sets of guns, 15 pilots with combat experience, 15 aircraft that could outturn the Corsair in low-speed engagements. Standard doctrine said never engage when outnumbered more than 3-1. Hanson was facing 5-1 odds. But he wasn't trying to win a dogfight. He was trying to disrupt an execution. The lead Zero element, 5 aircraft in Vic formation, was 800 yards from Lucky Lady and closing fast. Their pilots were focused on the bomber, lining up deflection angles for their 20 cannon. They hadn't seen the lone Corsair diving from above. Hanson armed his guns. 6.50 caliber Brownings, 400 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total. In sustained combat that was maybe 3 minutes of firing. Against 15 targets, every burst had to count. He pulled out of the dive at 18,000 feet, 200 yards behind the lead Zero element, closing at 450 miles per hour. The range was perfect, close enough for accuracy, far enough to avoid collision if the target exploded. Hanson centered the lead Zero in his gun sight and squeezed the trigger. All 6 guns hammered. The recoil shuddered through the airframe. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds walked up the Zero's fuselage, sparking against metal. The Japanese fighter's fuel tank ignited, a brilliant orange flash that consumed the aircraft in seconds. The Zero disintegrated. Wings folded upward, engine block tumbling forward, debris expanding in a cloud of fire and aluminum. 1 down, 14 to go. The remaining Zeros scattered, their formation discipline breaking as pilots realized they were under attack. 2 broke left, 2 broke right. The 5th pulled straight up, trying to gain altitude advantage. Hanson didn't chase. He dove toward Lucky Lady, positioning himself between the bomber and the remaining threats. His Corsair's speed advantage let him cover the distance in seconds. Inside Lucky Lady, the pilot, Lieutenant James Henderson, watched the Corsair appear like an avenging angel. His intercom crackled with his waist gunner's voice. "We got a friendly, single Corsair engaging." But Henderson knew the mathematics, 1 fighter against 14. "He's dead," Henderson said quietly. "They'll swarm him." The Japanese pilots thought the same thing. They regrouped quickly, forming into 2 7-plane elements. This lone American had just killed their squadron leader. Now they would return the favor with overwhelming force. You won't believe what happened during the next 8 minutes, because Robert Hanson was about to demonstrate why the Corsair was called the most dangerous fighter in the Pacific. The Zeros came at him from 3 directions simultaneously. 4 from above, diving with altitude advantage. 5 from the left, sweeping in from beam position. 5 more climbing from below, trying to force him into a vertical sandwich. Textbook Japanese tactics: overwhelm the target, eliminate escape routes, concentrate fire. Hanson saw them all. His eyes tracked each threat in fractions of seconds, his brain calculating angles, speeds, closure rates. The Corsair's speed was his only advantage. The Zeros could turn tighter, but they couldn't catch him in a straight line. He pushed the throttle to the firewall and dove toward the bombers. The 4 Zeros diving from above opened fire, 20 cannons and 7.7 machine guns converging where Hanson's Corsair had been. But he was already gone, pulling 6 GS in a hard right bank that brought him underneath Lucky Lady's belly. The bomber's shadow flashed over his canopy. He rolled inverted, scanning for threats. 2 Zeros had followed him through the turn, still firing. Tracer rounds arced past his left wing. Hanson snap-rolled upright and yanked the stick back. The Corsair's nose came up violently, pointing almost vertical. The 2 pursuing Zeros overshot, unable to match the maneuver. For 3 seconds, Hanson had clear shots at their undersides. He fired, 1 burst, 2 seconds, maybe 200 rounds. The nearest Zero took hits across its wing root. The fuel tank erupted. The second Zero broke away smoking, its engine damaged. 2 more down, 12 remaining. But now his airspeed was bleeding off. The vertical climb had cost him momentum. The Corsair was approaching stall speed, 160 miles per hour and dropping. In 3 seconds, he'd be a stationary target. Hanson kicked hard rudder and let the nose fall. The Corsair entered a controlled stall spin, dropping like a stone. The maneuver was desperate and dangerous. Stall spins killed pilots in training. But it was also unpredictable. The Zeros diving on his last position shot past overhead, their pilots unable to track his wild descent. He recovered at 16,000 feet, pulled out of the spin, and immediately climbed back toward the bombers. Pacific Queen was taking hits now, 3 Zeros making passes at her nose section. Her co-pilot's windscreen shattered. The number 4 engine burst into flames. Hanson closed from their 6 o'clock, firing as he came. 1 Zero peeled away trailing smoke. The other 2 broke formation, realizing they were being engaged from behind. Inside Pacific Queen, the pilot, Captain Robert Miller, fought to maintain control. His co-pilot was wounded, blood splattered across the instrument panel. The number 4 engine was burning, but that Corsair, that single insane Corsair, was keeping the Zeros occupied. "Who is that pilot?" Miller's navigator asked over the intercom. "I don't know," Miller replied, "but he just saved our lives." The Japanese pilots regrouped 2,000 yards out, reassessing. This wasn't a normal engagement. The American wasn't running, wasn't trying to escape. He was deliberately staying close to the bombers, using them as anchors, forcing the Zeros to come to him. And every time they did, he killed one of them. This is where things took a dramatic turn, because the Japanese squadron commander realized he was facing something unprecedented. Not just a skilled pilot, but someone willing to die protecting bombers. And that changed everything. The Japanese squadron commander made a decision: kill the Corsair first. He transmitted orders in rapid Japanese. The remaining 10 Zeros abandoned their staggered attack pattern and reformed into a single coordinated strike. Their target wasn't the bombers anymore, it was Hanson. Hanson saw them coming. 10 aircraft climbing into position 3,000 yards out, organizing themselves for a mass attack. This was different. This was elimination tactics. His ammunition counter showed 1,400 rounds remaining. Maybe 90 seconds of sustained fire. Against 10 targets, that meant 9 seconds per aircraft. If he didn't miss, didn't waste rounds, made every burst count. The odds were impossible. But the 3 bombers were still flying, still heading toward friendly territory. Every second he kept the Zeros engaged was another second those 30 men stayed alive. The first wave came in, 4 Zeros in a diamond formation, closing at combined speed of over 600 miles per hour. Hanson turned into them nose to nose, the most dangerous geometry in air combat. Whoever fired first and hit first survived. The other died. Hanson fired at 400 yards. The lead Zero fired simultaneously. Both aircraft shuddered under recoil. Tracer rounds crossed in the space between them, orange lines connecting the fighters like deadly threads. The Zero's canopy exploded. The pilot jerked backward, the aircraft nosed down out of control. But Hanson's Corsair took hits. 2 7.7 rounds punched through his left wing. 120 shell grazed the engine cowling, spraying metal fragments across his windscreen. He jinked right, breaking the attack geometry. The 3 remaining Zeros in the formation flashed past, missing by yards. Behind him, Lucky Lady's tail gunner, Sergeant Mike Calabrese, watched the dogfight with horrified fascination. He's taking hits, Calabrese reported over the intercom. The Corsair's smoking. Lieutenant Henderson checked his fuel gauges. We've got 40 minutes to friendly territory. Can he last that long? Against 10 zeros, Calabrese shook his head. No one can. But Hanson kept fighting. The second wave came from below, 3 zeros climbing in a loose formation. He dove to meet them, trading altitude for speed. His guns hammered again. 1 zero took wing hits and broke away. The other 2 scattered. 7 zeros remaining. But Hanson's aircraft was deteriorating. The engine was running rough, one cylinder misfiring, oil pressure fluctuating. The left aileron had bullet damage, making turns sluggish. His airspeed was down 30 miles per hour from normal cruise. And he was nearly out of ammunition. His guns had maybe 30 seconds of firing time left. The Japanese pilots sensed the weakness. They regrouped into 2 3-plane elements, positioning themselves for a coordinated scissors attack, one element from each side, forcing Hanson to choose which threat to face while the other attacked his blind spot. Inside Iron Duke, the waist gunner radioed to the pilot. "Sir, the Corsair's hit bad. He's losing speed. They're setting up for the kill." The pilot, Major Frank Peterson, keyed his intercom. "Gunners, prepare to engage. If that fighter goes down, we're next. Make every round count." However, the real story was just beginning, because 30 seconds later, something happened that no one expected. Not the Japanese, not the bomber crews, not even Hanson himself. The radio erupted with new voices. "Red 3, Blue Leader, we're coming in hot, you're 6 o'clock. Hanson's head snapped around. 8 Corsairs were diving from 25,000 feet. Blue Flight had broken formation and was racing to intercept. Behind them, another division followed. Captain Foss had seen what was happening, had watched one pilot hold off 15 enemy fighters for 8 minutes, had listened to the bomber crew's transmissions thanking the crazy Corsair driver who'd saved their lives, and had made his own decision to disobey orders. The entire escort formation was breaking off to support Hanson. The Japanese squadron commander saw them coming, 16 Corsairs diving at combat speed. His remaining 7 zeros were low on ammunition, scattered, facing overwhelming odds. He transmitted the recall order. The zeros broke off, diving away toward Rabaul. They'd lost 8 aircraft and failed to destroy a single bomber. It was a decisive defeat. Hanson throttled back, his hands shaking on the stick. The adrenaline crash hit him like a physical blow. His Corsair was trailing smoke from 3 separate hit locations. The engine was missing badly. Oil streaked across his windscreen. Blue Leader pulled alongside, Major Paul Fontana, the high-cover commander. He examined Hanson's aircraft and keyed his radio. "Red 3, you're shot to hell. Can you make it home?" Hanson checked his instruments. Oil pressure critical, fuel low, engine temperature in the red. "I'll make it." "Stay with us, we'll escort you back." The formation reformed around the 3 damaged bombers and 1 crippled Corsair. Lucky Lady, Pacific Queen, and Iron Duke were all still flying, though barely. Henderson had 1 engine out. Miller was flying on 3 engines with a wounded co-pilot. Peterson's fuel situation was critical. But they were alive. 30 airmen who should have died were heading home. The flight back took 53 minutes. Hanson's engine quit twice, once at 14,000 feet, once at 8,000. Both times he restarted it through sheer persistence and carburetor manipulation. His fuel gauge read empty for the last 20 minutes. Torquemada Airfield appeared ahead at 9:47 hours. The 3 B-24s landed first, emergency vehicles racing alongside. Hanson came in last, his Corsair trailing black smoke, landing gear barely locking into position. He touched down hard, rolled 1,500 feet, and the engine seized solid. The propeller stopped mid-rotation. Hanson sat in the cockpit for 30 seconds, hands still gripping the stick, unable to move. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft. They counted 47 bullet holes. The left wing had a 20 hole you could put your fist through. 2 cylinders were completely destroyed. The oil tank had a 4-inch crack. The crew chief looked at Hanson as he climbed out. "Sir, how did you fly this thing home?" "I didn't have a choice." "Stay with me because this next part is crucial." Within 2 hours, Hanson was summoned to Major Owen's office. And what happened there would determine whether he faced a medal or a court-martial. Major Owen stood behind his desk, his face unreadable. Lieutenant Hanson, you disobeyed a direct order from your flight commander. You broke formation during combat operations. You engaged enemy aircraft against explicit instructions. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges? Yes, sir. Captain Foss has submitted a formal report recommending disciplinary action. He states that your actions endangered the entire escort mission by reducing formation strength. Hanson said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had violated orders. The consequences were clear. Owens walked to the window, staring out at the flight line. However, he continued, I also have 3 other reports on my desk. He picked up the first. Lieutenant Henderson, pilot of Lucky Lady, he states that your intervention saved his aircraft and crew from certain destruction, 10 men who would be dead. The second report, Captain Miller, Pacific Queen, same statement, 10 more men. The third, Major Peterson, Iron Duke, 10 more. Owens set the reports down. 30 men, Lieutenant, 30 American airmen who came home because you disobeyed orders. How do I reconcile that with military discipline? Sir, I'm not finished. Owens turned to face him. Captain Foss also submitted something else. After he watched you hold off 15 Zeros for 8 minutes, after he saw what you were willing to do, he made his own decision to break formation. 16 Corsairs abandoned their assigned positions to support you. Owens paused. By his own doctrine, Captain Foss should face the same charges. So should Major Fontana. So should every pilot who broke formation. Should I court-martial the entire fighter group? The question hung in the air. The Navy doesn't work that way, Owens continued. We have regulations, orders, discipline. Without them, we have chaos. He picked up one more document. This morning, Admiral Halsey's headquarters received a message from the 307th Bomb Group commander. He's recommending you for the Navy Cross. The bomber crews are calling you the guardian of Rabaul. Hanson blinked, sir. You put doctrine and orders aside and made a human decision. You decided 30 lives were worth your own, and you were right. Owens sat down. But you were also insubordinate, reckless, and you endangered yourself unnecessarily. So what happens now, sir? Owens smiled slightly. You're grounded for 72 hours for aircraft damage assessment. After that, you're back on flight status, and Captain Foss has requested you as his permanent wingman. Apparently he wants the crazy bastard who ignores orders when he should watching his 6. Hanson felt relief flood through him. No court-martial, no discharge. But Lieutenant, Owens added, his voice hardening, if you ever disobey orders again without damn good reason, I'll ground you permanently. Understood? Yes, sir, understood. 2 weeks later, the Navy Cross citation arrived. It read, for extraordinary heroism and distinguished service, willingly accepting overwhelming odds, saving 3 aircraft and 30 crew members through aggressive action against superior enemy forces. But the real legacy wasn't the medal. It was doctrine change. Within a month, Pacific Fleet Fighter Command issued new escort guidelines. Fighter elements are authorized to break formation to defend stragglers when numerical superiority can be maintained. Hanson's disobedience had rewritten the rules. Looking back, Robert Hanson's decision on March 3, 1944, represented more than individual heroism. It exposed a fundamental flaw in fighter escort doctrine. The assumption that formation integrity always superseded individual aircraft protection. Hanson proved that doctrine needed flexibility, that rules existed to serve outcomes, not the other way around. The battle statistics were remarkable. 1 Corsair against 15 Zeros, 8 enemy aircraft destroyed or damaged, 3 bombers saved, 30 lives preserved, 0 friendly losses. But the numbers don't capture the psychological impact. Bomber crews throughout the Pacific heard the story. They knew that fighter pilots would break formation to protect them, that if they fell behind, they wouldn't be abandoned. Morale improved dramatically. Fighter doctrine evolved. The rigid formation discipline gave way to flexible escort, maintaining position but authorizing section leaders to break off for defense when necessary. Loss rates for stragglers dropped from 80% to under 30% within 2 months. Hanson continued flying. By August 1944, he'd accumulated 25 confirmed kills, making him one of the Marine Corps top aces. But he never forgot that the mission wasn't personal glory. it was bringing people home. On February 3, 1944, during a strafing run over New Britain, Hanson's Corsair was hit by anti-aircraft fire. He crashed into the ocean and was never recovered. He was 23 years old. The Navy Cross was upgraded to the Medal of Honor posthumously. The citation emphasized not just his victories, but his selfless devotion to protecting bomber crews at extreme personal risk. Today, F4U Corsairs are displayed in museums worldwide. But the real legacy of March 3, 1944, isn't preserved in aircraft. It's preserved in doctrine manuals that still authorize aggressive escort action when lives are at stake. Robert Hanson proved that sometimes the most important decision a soldier can make is knowing when the rules don't apply, when doctrine fails reality, when following orders means abandoning the mission's true purpose. 30 men came home that day because one pilot decided that orders were negotiable, but lives were not. So there you have it, the complete story of 2nd Lieutenant Robert Hanson, and the day he dove through 15 zeros to save 3 crippled bombers. From disobeying direct orders to rewriting fighter doctrine, this mission proved that heroism sometimes requires breaking the rules. 1 Corsair, 8 minutes of combat, 30 lives saved, and a Medal of Honor earned through defiance that became doctrine. What impressed you most about this incredible mission? The decision to disobey orders, the 8-minute running battle against impossible odds, or the fact that his actions changed how fighters protected bombers for the rest of the war? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into World War II's most remarkable combat missions and the pilots who flew them, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching WW2 Aviation, and I'll see you in the next one.